Everybody, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today's video is about the FT1 Pro, so buckle up because I have a lot to talk about with this guy. Now, this is Pro. Now, does that mean it's a better version of the FT1? Well, maybe to some people. They are very different headphones, though. It's not like this is just a better FT1. The original FT1 was a closed-back dynamic driver headphone with these gorgeous walnut ear cups. And then the new one, the Pro, is an open-back planar magnetic headphone with this gorgeous like blue sapphire coated diaphragm behind this open grill. Now, the headband design is the same. The price is similar. This is $200 versus $150 for the closed back. But aside from the headband and the price being somewhat close, they're actually very different with how they perform and I think how they're tuned as well. Now, according to FiiO, the reason why they called this the Pro is because they wanted to have the FT1 represent the entry-level, lightweight, affordable series. And the Pro is kind of like an evolution of the standard FT1 in that regard. I think it can be confusing because typically Pro isn't used in that way when it comes to totally different headphone models. It's not even just a driver. Like I said, it's open versus closed. Even the grills look different. So it's a little bit confusing, but the reason behind it is the pricing and the evolution of that series. The headband is the same though, and whether you like that or not, I think it's nice because it's extremely compact. And as far as comfort goes, I'll get into all that, but I just wanted to cover the few similarities that they had. This was sent to me for review by FiiO. It won't affect what I say about it, but I always want to disclose that. I will have purchase links in the description below, but they're generic purchase links. They have nothing to do with FiiO. There's no like special tracking with them. I don't do this channel for money. This is actually a secondary thing for me. I have a day job. The YouTube audio stuff is kind of just my passion project because I love talking about this stuff. So links in the description if you do buy it. If I have generic Amazon links, that does support the channel because I buy a lot of stuff that I review. Otherwise, just buy it wherever you like. As far as basic specs go, this is an open back planar. I already talked about that, and it's rather lightweight at just under 400 grams, which is lighter considering it's a planar magnetic headphone because they have a higher density with magnets, and that adds a lot of weight. A lot of the weight you get on a planar is from the driver itself. It is only a 20 ohm impedance, and it's very sensitive considering, so it is really easy to drive. This is really important because if you're trying to buy something, and I say gaming as a reference because some people will just plug it into a PlayStation or Xbox controller. Those are known to only have about 30 milliwatts at 32 ohms. Not a lot of power. It's more than enough power to get these to a loud enough volume to enjoy the game and even damage your hearing if you're maxing it out. Now, if you're using something like a DAP, like the FiiO M23, which is a really nice media player I've been using for a lot of my testing for headphones and IEMs on the go, especially in bed at night, or you have a higher end amp, it doesn't need a high-end amp to scale. It works really well with mid-range to entry-level stuff, and you can get a wonderful sound, which I really like because it's not an expensive headphone, so you shouldn't have to buy expensive gear just to enjoy it. Now, as far as what's in the box, it's very similar to the standard FT1. It's effectively the same. The packaging is identical, aside from that nice little Pro label on the box and the upgraded graphic. You get a FiiO case. This is a hard case with a canvas top. I really like the texture of this case. It looks pretty premium, but it's like a no-frills case inside. You have to keep in mind this is a sub $200 headphone, and when you compare it to other headphones in this price range or even above that come with effectively nothing for accessories or a case, that's a wonderful deal. As far as cables go, yes, cables, because there are two in the box, and they're really nice quality. You always get the standard, 6.3 millimeter or quarter inch on one side, and it is a removable adapter, so you'll plug that into your source, and then a dual 3.5 millimeter TRS because this is terminated with a non-proprietary TRS port on the bottom. Now, this is not proprietary. This is a little bit of a recess, but because the opening is rather large, I don't see too many aftermarket cables not fitting. You can tell the stock ones are actually quite large and they still fit no problem. So you should be okay there. Now, it also comes with a balanced cable. This is a 4.4 millimeter Penacon connection with, again, the dual 3.5. Nylon jacket, not usually my favorite material for microphonics. Because this is an open back, microphonics really wasn't an issue. Nothing beyond what is common for any cable touching your shirt. Now, the jacks are terminated pointing straight down, but because the cup isn't so large and it's recessed a little bit, when I'm wearing it, so let's just put it on so you can see what I mean because actions are louder than words. So I'm going to plug this in, put it on, and you can see I'm still clearing my shoulder pretty much no problem. I'm not like rubbing into my shirt or anything like that. Even if I move it around, the transference of vibration from the cable, it's next to non-existent, to be honest. Now, as far as comfort and durability goes, this is going to be kind of a mixed bag, and this is why I always want to be honest with you guys. So the headband is great, okay? It's padded. I like this design, and because of this like suede material, it's not going to flake off over time. The top part is a traditional leatherette, and again, it's $200, so that's to be expected. You get really nice hybrid ear pads. The stuff that touches your ear is a sport fabric. This is going to help for a few things. One, breathability, so it's not going to build up that sweaty sensation that often less expensive leatherette pads have. You also get a more consistent sound delivery because this is a little bit of a leaky pad by default, having this sport fabric material. If you don't have a perfect seal, your bass isn't going to get totally destroyed. The resonance of this driver is actually decently low as well. So even if you do break a seal, you actually get a little bit of a bass lift in like the 60, 70 hertz area, and then a little bit more roll off. But it's not really seal sensitive, which is awesome. That's really important for, you know, your day-to-day. In addition to that, the pads are removable. All you have to do is pull this off, and you can see that acoustic fabric cover over the driver baffle, which does help attenuate some of the higher frequencies, and it also protects the speaker. There are no additional pads in the box to change the sound or comfort, but again, at $200, that's pretty much non-existent anyway. And the fact that it does have this universal ring means that pad swapping should be pretty possible depending on the pad dimensions down the road. These pads are rather large, so if you have a larger ear, that's not going to be an issue either. It should fit a variety of heads, and they're also rather deep, so depending again on how large your ears are. And I'm pleased to say that because of how plush these are, being an open back and all of the other things factored in, it's actually great for glasses comfort as well. Now this pad, I was kind of alluding to the fabric materials and why I like the way this is built. The pad is a little bit thinner. This is not a robust padding, and the only issue I've had with this, it was less of a problem on the standard FT1 because it's the exact same pad, but the FT1 weighs about 40 grams less. That might have been just enough to minimize how much pressure you felt on the top of your head. This one feels like it floats more in my head, which I really like. The weight of the FT1 Pro, again, it's more on the driver, like the ear cup design. And as a result, I have a hard landing up here. Obviously, I'm wearing a hat right now. It's just for the video. But when you do wear it, it's not a painful point. But I think the FT1 Pro could have had the exact same headband design, but slightly larger, like nugget pads, if you will. I think a little bit more pressure release up top would have gone a long way for comfort. So I wouldn't be surprised if down the road I start seeing some people do headband mods, whether it's like a Capra Audio strap mod or, you know, one of those zip up ones on Amazon. I think that will help for long-term listening sessions, especially if this pad ever wears out over time. Now, I mentioned the planar driver, and it has this blue sapphire coating on the diaphragm. I think the driver is stunning. It's probably one of the best looking planars through the grill, and it's such a shame that it's teased behind this cover. Now, this cover is obviously there to protect it, and it also is used for tuning purposes because this will affect how the driver, like back waves, affect the sound. Now, I've never had any kind of a build quality issue with FiiO products before. I have a lot. I think I have their entire collection of headphones now, but I want to point this out because my FT1 Pro had a little bit of an issue, and this is one of two things I'm going to cover on the whole build quality and durability thing because this is a really important thing to understand. So this is a bass port right here, this like vent. That is part of the tuning to get the driver to sound the way that it does. Now, this is the right cup. And you can see it's slightly recessed, and if I push on it, nothing happens. Doesn't make a sound, doesn't move. Now if I go on the left side, you can see it's going to be hard on the camera, but it is sticking out just a little bit. Now if I push on this, see it move? Maybe not, you don't see it? You can actually hear it moving. It rattles. And even if I walk around my house wearing it, because I mentioned using that M23 DAP from FiiO, when I paused it and I walked, I could actually hear a rattling sound, and I thought something was loose on the driver. It turns out it's my vent cover that is loose and rattling. So I haven't found a way to remove it without risking damaging it, and I didn't want to do that and risk damaging it for this video. I'm sure FiiO is going to take care of it, but if you hear a rattle in yours, use a plastic tool, not a metal tool, and maybe tap those grills to see if yours is doing the same exact thing. I have no idea how specific this is to my unit, but I wanted to point that out in case you hear it. The other thing I want to point out, this is a planar, and I've seen some people talk about this with Odyssey Maxwell headphones, is the driver crinkle. Now mine doesn't visually look crinkled because it has that acoustic fabric or that mesh I showed you earlier, that like fleece material. I have a little driver crinkle, not when I put them on, but they're like the first day or two of using it, I heard like little crinkles and pops. And if you're an OCD person and you pop a soda can or pop can, depending on where you are or whatever word you use for it, you have a can of soda sitting next to you and it's freshly carbonated. And every now and then you can kind of hear those bubbles popping a little bit. Well, I was getting almost that kind of a sound just by wearing it without even playing it, without even moving. So it was almost like they were settling in. Now, I waited to do this review after using this for multiple days. I think I've had this for about a week now, of heavy use, by the way. And it's basically gone. I don't hear any more crinkle sounds. Still well within the return policy, which is awesome. But I want to point out the two only concerns I have with this headphone. The majority of this review is going to be a glowing review of this headphone, but these are two big asterisks to consider because, you know, your money is important and you want to make sure you get something that's going to last. So now it's time to talk about sound quality and do the objective stuff first that takes my opinion out of it so you can see how it's measured. Now I use a Gross style Pinaclone. It's a KB006 if you're familiar with that, and I use an IC711 coupler. I've had a lot of different measurements added to my Squiglink site, so I will have a link in the description below for that if you want to compare my measurements of headphones to each other. Don't always compare my measurements to someone else's because all of these rigs, they simulate an ear, and if they're not using the exact same ear and coupler and same testing methodology, well, there's going to be some variance induced by the testing rig. So don't always compare it to like a BK5128 measurement and assume it's apples to apples. So now that we've disclosed that, I want to start with one quick measurement. Now I also started measuring the electrical impedance of headphones because dynamic drivers typically have a big bump in the lower frequencies, which can affect how it sounds with OTL amps. You know, if you have a high output impedance tube amp, for example, and it also kind of shows where the resonant frequency is of the driver. Now, this guy is crazy linear, very common for a planar magnetic headphone to be relatively flat. What this means is, again, if you remember me saying the impedance was rated at 20 ohms, I measured it at about 18.7 ohms, and the resonance or like the bump in frequency happens right about 75 hertz. And it only goes up to about 21.8 or let's say 21.5 ohms. Not really a big shift. So this is really good. It won't really get affected by whatever you're connecting it to, which is awesome. So if you're hearing major shifts depending on the amp, it might be more of a placebo effect. So I want to go into frequency response now. And this is where the FT1 Pro is a magician at $200. The sound quality measurably is fantastic. Keep in mind, this is a $200 open back that has flat bass response down to 30 hertz with high power handling. It's a pretty remarkable feat. And I'm not going to use the graphs as much, I think, anymore to completely describe the sound because this is just a measurement on one particular rig. This flat bass without any weird peaks or dips means it does kind of represent a more natural timbre in this case. It's not coloring the sound too much by overly boosting bass. The bass isn't lacking, so you're not seeing like a major roll-off. And again, it's relatively flat throughout the mid-range. The most noteworthy thing is in the 1000 hertz to about 5000 hertz area. This is kind of where you hear most of the difference among headphones, aside from like a major shift in bass. So this is scooped. It's kind of more similar to the Hi-Fi Min Scoop, but it doesn't seem as bad when you compare it. And when I say bad, I'm not saying Hi-Fi Min is bad. This scoop basically just pushes certain instruments and vocals further back in the mix, but it's not necessarily coloring the sound to where they sound unnatural. They just don't jump out at you as much. The biggest thing that people I think are going to have kind of a different listening experience with is at 3000 hertz. We can hear these frequencies differently depending on your ear shape and your ear canal, but the rest of the tuning, that you have a little bit of a recess in the pinna gain area at 4000 hertz, which is great. I have no problems there. And the treble is filled in and extends enough in the high treble without being piercing or metallic sounding. This is an incredible sound profile, and I want to show you a couple basics or comparisons. The standard FT1, very bass forward. It's a dynamic driver, and it's closed back. So the bass is deep and it's very punchy as shown on the chart. And then you have a much stronger lift in the 1 to 2K area. Vocals are much more forward on the standard FT1, almost like it has just a slightly nasal or I'm trying to think of the right word, kind of a sharper, shoutier sound in certain vocals. It's not bad. I still think the FT1 is one of the best closebacks for the money, period. And then the upper treble is comparable. They present differently because it's closed back first open, but I wanted to show you compared to the FT1. Now, the other one people are going to ask about, which I do have, is the FiiO FT5. Very different sound profile. This is a big shift in the low mid-range, or mid-range, I should say, at 400 hertz. So, and when I say mid-range, you can see here, there's the low mids at 300 to 800 hertz. That has more of a boxy, thicker presentation to it, and it doesn't help that it's followed by this big scoop from 800 hertz to 2000 hertz, just like the FT1 Pro, but even more recessed. And then again, I like it because there's no like overly forward shoutiness to the FT5. Also recessed in the pinna area, no big deal there. And then you could see it lift with some upper treble energy. The FT5 sounds colored for sure compared to the FT1 Pro, and it sounds darker. Now, I'm going to do some subjective talk when I compare to other headphones in a moment, but just to quickly show you the HiFiMan Edition XS, I'm going to get rid of the FT5 and change the color of the XS. There are the closest thing I could find up until the high treble. The Edition XS is much more emphasized in the upper treble, especially at like 10,000 hertz and up, and it does sound a little bit more metallic and sparkly sounding. However, the Edition XS is still wonderful in the sub bass all the way up into 3,000 hertz. They are very, very similar. It's the closest thing I could find from another brand's planar. Now, build quality, comfort, measurements, all of that stuff is important, but at the end of the day, you have to like what you own as far as sound quality goes. I think it needs to be comfortable first, because what's the point? But once you move past that, you have to like the sound. I don't have to. And my goal of these videos is to help you find something that you think you're gonna like. So I want to keep in mind, or open with that, but I can tell you from all the open back planar magnetic headphones I own under 500, maybe even under 1,000, the more I'm trying to think about this, I'm always leaving that asterisk in case I forgot one. This has required the least amount of EQ. And when I say the least, it requires almost zero EQ. I could just straight up plug this in and run with it and be super happy. And that's really important because depending on what you're plugging this into, well, maybe EQ isn't an option. When I talked about the bass being relatively flat to 30 hertz, that alone is a huge feat at $200 for an open back planar, just straight up from the measured side. When you compare it to the HiFiMan Sandara, which is selling for a bit more money, the roll off happens sooner. And in addition to that, the bass is more visceral on the FT1 Pro. The bass is more visceral than the FT1 Dynamic. So even though the dynamic driver FT1 has a louder bass, you can hear a lot more bass, the FT1 Pro, you can feel more bass. You actually feel it interacting with your ear and your skull more, and that does change how we perceive bass, and I think it helps with immersion as well. Another thing I like about the FT1 Pro is it actually has a pretty high power handling. It's not the highest. There is some distortion when you're pushing it, and I think it kind of breaks up some of the mid-range and treble at higher volumes if you've boosted bass and turn it up. There's only so much you can expect an open back $200 headphone to do. Something like the HiFiMan Edition XS, if you're chasing high SPL and bass, especially with EQ, the Edition XS has a little bit more power handling capability behind it. This is more in line with something like the Odyssey MM100. They're both great as far as overall bass presence goes. And again, that visceralness that I was talking about is huge. It is punchy enough to work well with rock music, and because of the way it's tuned in the higher frequencies, again, I can listen to rock, I can listen to acoustics, or acoustic performances. The big thing with this guy is because the 1 to 2K area is recessed, there's zero shout for me, there's no sibilance issues for me, and what I found is some string instruments, some vocals, they're just quieter, and if you're okay with a slightly softer presentation there, then the FT1 Pro is fantastic because it does everything else almost perfectly for my preference, and considering, again, the price of this, it's pretty ridiculous. When you compare it to the Edition XS, they are very similar under 3,000 hertz. The biggest difference with the XS that you notice when A/Bing them is the treble is much stronger on the XS, and it sounds more metallic and sparkly. So if you have some hearing loss, and this isn't an insult, I've said this a few times in the past, and I'm not using this to harp on the XS. You can have excellent hearing and still like the XS, even without EQ, because it depends on how loud you play it. There's just more upper treble emphasis, and things just sound more metallic, more bright. You could say more airy, but at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily sound any wider to me. It just sounds more sparkly and a little bit fatiguing for me at higher volumes. So with the XS, I didn't find I had to EQ much You could EQ more bass and get a lot of fun out of it, but if I'm doing any EQ, it's because I'm pulling the upper treble down. With the Sundara is tuned really well also. In a lot of cases, I actually like the sound quality of the Sundara more than the XS, but it doesn't seem to have the same kind of resolution or overall capability that the FT1 Pro has or the Edition XS. I just really like the chassis. I think it fits my head really well. I don't want to digress too much into all these because I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth. But I've used this for gaming. It's great for gaming. I still think that Sennheiser has a slight edge in FPS gaming, like the 560S and the HD 490 Pro personally, but I had no issues with this. Listening fatigue is a big thing because not having it to be overly bright or fatiguing sounding means that you can play with it or listen to music for a longer period of time without being punished for it. Honestly, for a planar, it's closer to like what my ideal reference sound is than a lot of dynamics even. You know, I listened to the Sennheiser, which I actually have here. I was playing around with the baffle, so if you have a keen eye, normally it's not exposed like this. This is the 6XX, also $200 from Drop. Mid-range king, timbre is absolutely incredible, but it doesn't have the same emotion as this guy. And most of the time, I like this one more. I liked the new APOS R70X I reviewed recently more as well. But the issue with the R70X, aside from being out of stock, like the same time my review came out, more might be coming. That headphone requires a lot of amp power to really shine, in my opinion. 470 ohms, not as sensitive. And at this price of $200, this is like a more attainable version of a lot of things I like from the R70X. I think that one sounded a little bit warmer. This is just a little bit more neutral, but the bass comes across warmer because of the recess in the 1 to 2K. Now, another thing that's important is attack and decay, and some of this stuff is really hard to always accurately cover subjectively. I don't have the way, at least I'm not smart enough to accurately measure attack and decay. I don't know what kind of tests are out there for that, for like impulse response measurements or something. My listening experience though, attack and decay can be tricky because when you have really fast treble, high treble, or stronger upper treble, it can make the driver sound faster because in order to do those frequencies strongly, it does have to be a fast driver. Well, the way this is tuned and or how it performs for attack and decay sounds closer to like that blend and harmony between a planar driver and a dynamic driver. Dynamics typically sound more natural to me. Planars can have more of that plasticky metallic sound. This one just doesn't really do that, but it still has that visceralness that I like for planars in that sub bass area. So I think a ton of people, like the majority of people who get it, are really going to like the FT1 Pro. Now, the MM100 is here. I know it's double the price, but again, open back planar is under 500. I think it's fair to consider a wide range to get what you want. The MM100 doesn't have the same mid-range presentation. That's the biggest change, and you have a much larger scoop in the pinna area, but it doesn't sound as scooped as that when you compare it to this. They're actually not too far apart in that recess. The biggest difference is there's a lot more forward bite from like 800 hertz to 1500 hertz, or maybe 12. Vocals and acoustic instruments are much more forward on the MM100. So if you're listening to someone like Fink, his voice is like right up in front of your face on the MM100, where it's much more relaxed and pulled back on the FT1 Pro. So if that mid-range forwardness is important to you and it's something you're after or like, then maybe the Odyssey MM100 is better for that. Power handling wise, I don't feel like it really took any more EQ than this did, which is pretty impressive considering the price. But they're both more than capable of getting loud to a point where it's not really good for your hearing anyway. The FT1 Pro the FT5 is a totally different animal. I think it's stunning. This is one of my favorite looking $500 headphones, and I switched to the suede pads because this one comes with 2 pads. More people, to me, are going to like the FT1 Pro sound signature more, like a lot more. Without EQ, this just works for like everything I listen to. This has a thicker, boxier presentation, even with the suede pads, with less low treble, frankly. It just sounds like a darker, thicker, boxier headphone, and it definitely colors the sound. One of the magic tricks of the FT5, though, is it takes EQ really well, and it is a magical sounding headphone with somewhat aggressive EQ, but if you have the ability to do that, To me, this kind of like throws notes around a little bit more. And frankly, this is like one of the best ear pad feels under 500. I love how this feels on my head. If you're okay with a heavier headphone, the Sennheiser 490 Pro with the stock suede pads is also amazing, or the velour. This is easily up there, and I love the suspension strap. I would rather feel this on my head, but listen to the FT1 Pro if I couldn't do EQ. With EQ, it gets to be closer, in my opinion, but not like from a power handling standpoint. More of just, I think what you're paying for here is some of the build quality elements and the accessories, the premium case, etc. Here's the thing. I mean, the FT1 Pro is the best value. And regardless of what model you look at, my top two under 500 right now, to keep the whole honesty thing going with you all, because I appreciate your support, these two are like the reigning champs under 500 for me. And you can even make the case for the Ananda Nano, which is like now pushing over 400, but I wanted to keep that closer to a similar price range. The Edition XS, one of the only issues I have is it's huge physically, and on the smallest setting, it's just small enough for me to be able to wear it. The FT1 Pro is much more comfortable. It feels more secure. This is loose, and if I'm not wearing my hat and I'm looking up or down, it just like does all this kind of stuff. If you have a larger head, not a big deal. If you're not too active, not a big deal. And if you're doing some EQ to tame that upper treble, the bass of this is just absolutely ridiculous. It just handles a ton. You know, that big egg-shaped planar that HiFiMan's known for. It's pretty good. Now, you have the whole talk about build quality with HiFiMan. All of my HiFiMans have been fine, with exception to a couple of them having like a slightly looser 3.5 terminal, which happens over time for me. The rest of them have been fine. FiiO has been super reliable as well. This is the first FiiO product that I've had a couple weird issues with the rattle and the driver crinkle. Now that went away, but I don't want to hide that from you. I'm trying to like cover a lot of different things here that I think some people who are seriously considering this headphone are going to ask about. If I just straight up, if someone said, hey, under 500 bucks planar, you can't do any mods to it, you can't do EQ, which one would you pick up? And I think I still just go for the FT1 Pro. I would, get one that I hope doesn't have a rattle, but aside from that, the sound quality is great. The comfort is close to perfect aside from that headband pad. It really does exceed its value point at 200, just like the FT1 did on the dynamic driver closeback. It's kind of crazy that FiiO has made some of the best headphones for the money this year with both FT1 models. That is remarkable, and I do want to give huge kudos to them. Not one headphone is going to be for everybody, but this is one of the most versatile headphones for the masses, and I think it's going to have huge success, provided my couple little issues I had is unique to my particular model. So with that being said, I really hope you found this video helpful. I will be doing like an open back guide where I'm going to cover roughly 45 to 50 different headphones. It'll probably be an hour long with chapters. I've been spending a lot of time with that, but I really wanted to talk about the FT1 Pro because this is a pretty remarkable headphone. And if you're on the fence, I really hope this helped give you an idea what direction to go. So with that being said, thank you so much for the support. Don't forget to like and subscribe so I can see you at the next video. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.